Hello. So this is your video on how to build your perfect mountain pose. You'll see that my handy assistant, Taylor Poe, is joining us today. I may need to kick him out. He's getting a little wild. But the reason I wanted to do this video is because mountain pose, also known as Tadasana, is it's one of those poses that gets overlooked quite often, even though it's a very important and foundational pose when it comes to a lot of yoga flows, a lot of just like general foundational asana. So I thought I would take some time today to help you build your perfect Tadasana. As it is the mountain pose, the base is the most important, which is why we want to start with our feet. You know, the positioning of our feet, where are they? How do they feel on the mat? You know what? I told you I had to kick him out. He's not doing his job today. Bring you, bud. There we go. All right. He'll say hi later. Anyways, back to Tadasana. So really when we start with Tadasana as the mountain pose, like you think of the image of a mountain, it gives you a really strong, firm, stable image, which is what you're trying to create when you're getting into a strong Tadasana. So starting with the feet, the base of the mountain, just take a look down at your feet, your toes. You may have heard a lot of yoga instructors say, you know, keep your feet hip width distance apart. It's a little, like it's hard to kind of know what that means, right? Because is it the outer hip? Is it like the line straight up and down? It's just a little difficult to know how far apart your feet should probably be. So one trick that I've used is make fists with both of your hands and put them together. And then if you can, you might need to bend the knees quite a bit. Bring those fists down to the mat and then toe heel your feet together so that kind of that big toe knuckle is touching the pinky knuckles of your fists. And that's usually, for most people, about 4 to 6 inches. So 2 fists put together between the feet. Now looking down at your feet again, lift your toes off of the mat, spread them nice and wide, and now set them back down on the mat, nice and wide, kind of like if you had your hands on the mat for a downward facing dog. This is just going to give you a little bit of extra stability in your stance here. So working our way up, we're going to focus on the shins rather than the knees. And this is just kind of a different way of looking at it. A lot of yoga instructors will call out the cue, you know, micro bend in the knees, which is, you know, it's relatively easy to understand, but how much, you know, and especially in Tadasana, do we want to have like really bent knees? Probably not, but locking out those knees is not going to be too comfortable for very long. So instead of focusing on those knees, just send your attention to your shins, this front part of the lower leg. And as you're standing there, just try to push the shins forward ever so slightly. Maybe 1/2 inch to 1 inch forward in space. And just see how that feels. So to this point, we have our feet about 2 fist widths apart, toes are nice and wide on the mat, and those shin bones are pushing forward ever so slightly. All right, so let's move our attention up to the hips. I'll turn to the side to kind of demonstrate what I'm talking about here. So again, shins a little bit forward. For some people, this may make them kind of curl that tailbone under, or you may have an over-exaggerated kind of pushing out of that tailbone where the bum goes out pretty far. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do some cat and cow standing. And if you're familiar with cat and cow, you usually do that on your hands and knees. And as you inhale, you're going to look up slightly and arch the back, pressing that bum out so you've got a nice curve in the spine. And then exhale as you pull that tailbone under, curl the spine, and look down towards the mat. So just do a few rounds of that to get a feeling for what your spine does when you're doing cat and cow. And now come to stillness, kind of right in the middle of the cow and the cat. So your tailbone is not quite tucked underneath, but it's not pointing out, more pointing down towards the mat. All right, so for the reminders, we've got feet 2 fists apart, toes spread nice and wide. Those shins are pulling slightly forward, and that tailbone is pointing down towards the ground, but not tucking underneath. And another way to kind of get a feeling for where your hips like to be in this position, kind of like sway from side to side, make big circles with the hips from one side to the other. Make them as big as you can while keeping your feet in place. Put those hands on the hips if that helps. And as you're making these circles, try to go smaller and smaller each time, until eventually you're making just kind of like micro little circles with the hips. Until you come to stillness and you stop. Again, you'll likely find yourself in a position where that tailbone is not pointing out too far and it's not tucking way underneath. So now take your hands and just kind of place them on the top of that pelvic ridge. And you should feel the nice natural curve of the spine. Your hands should fit in pretty neatly there. And drawing the elbows back together, we're going to work towards opening the chest without arching the back too much. So again, keeping that neutral spine. And just feel what the natural curve of your spine feels like. What does this lower spine, thoracic spine, what does that feel like when you're in neutral? And now focusing on the front end, place your hand over your belly button. Just get a sense for that space in your body. And without sucking the belly in, we're not trying to round the back. Without sucking it in, just concentrate on drawing the belly button in towards the spinal column. It's kind of a weird image, but you're basically just tightening the core a little bit. So you may see some tiny movement, but again, we're not sucking it in. So you got the natural curve of the spine, the navel is tucked in, strengthening, holding that core nice and tight. Take a look down at your feet. Have they shifted? Are your legs straight? Locked out in the knees? If they aren't, just gently push those shins forward. Now take your hands kind of in robot position. I'll face you for this one. So bent at the elbows, robot arms, palms are facing each other. Take those thumbs, and if you can, gently hook them underneath the armpits. Your elbows are still pointed down at the ground. If this doesn't work, you can simply place those thumbs kind of on the top of the shoulder, maybe on the outside, depending on how tight or flexible your shoulders are. Now with your hands still tucked, if they are tucked, palms still facing together, you're going to keep those arms pretty much in line with the body, so we're not letting them flare out. We're keeping those elbows tucked in. And as you keep them tucked, push those elbows up towards the sky. And this is going to cause your thumbs to come out of that armpit. That's okay. And once you're here to the point where your thumbs are kind of closer to the top of the shoulders, you can release those hands and simply let the fingertips float towards the ceiling. Can't quite see my hands because my video is not big enough, but you get the picture, right? So your fingertips are reaching towards the sky. Now, a lot of people tend to kind of push their arms up, and the shoulders go up into the ears and things get kind of cramped in there. So as you're standing here with your arms overhead, consciously draw those shoulder blades down so that you're not squishing your ears with your shoulders. Palms are still facing each other. And this is mountain pose with arms extended overhead. You also have the option to bring those arms down by the sides, remembering to keep that chest nice and open. So if you're looking for a way to open that chest, you can always do that thumb hooking practice. And another way to do that, if you choose to keep your arms by the sides, is hook those arms and then just without lifting the elbows, gently press up so that you're really gently lifting the chest up. Hold it there, and you can release the arms down along the sides. Now, another question is the positioning of the neck. So one of the ways that I like to cue this when I'm really focusing on keeping the throat open is, once again, make a fist. Nothing too hard. We're not going after anybody. But a gentle fist. Take that fist and place it gently beneath your chin so that the pointer finger is underneath your chin and your pinky finger is resting kind of in that little groove between the collarbones. So here, we're not trying to squish the hand down. You can kind of tell how my voice changes when I do that. We're just very gently letting the chin rest on that fist, and that fist is resting on the collarbones. And once you get a good feeling for, what this sensation is like to have an open throat, you can slowly lower that hand back down. And now you're in Tadasana. So I'll call out a few things that we focused on today. So remain in your Tadasana, and just as I go through this mental checklist, take notes, see how things feel, and adjust if needed. So again, feet are about 2 fist widths apart. Toes are nice and spread out, pressing into the mat. Those shin bones are pulling slightly forward, which creates a micro bend in the knee. Your pelvis is not too far out, not tucking under, the tailbone pointed ever so slightly down. You've got an open chest. So again, if you need to test this, you can hook those thumbs underneath those armpits. And while you're doing this, make sure you're focusing on tightening in on that core, very gently drawing the navel in towards the spine. And now with the hands, if you choose to have your arms extended overhead, with your thumbs in the armpits, gently lift those elbows towards the sky. Once your thumbs have reached kind of the top part of those shoulders, just let your fingertips float to the sky. And if your shoulder, if they start to creep up and you find yourself really reaching high, just gently draw those shoulder blades down and out of the ears. Again, another option is to have hands at your sides. and that is your mountain pose. What's really fun about this is that when you have a really good sense of your Tadasana, you start to notice Tadasana when you are in other poses. So for example, when you are in high plank, you can take note of the positioning of your feet and the positioning of your pelvis and how open is your chest. Are you kind of slumping up, or are you really pressing down through the earth? Similarly with downward facing dog, you know, a lot of the time people, they can let those shoulders come into the ears and it rounds that back, and downward dog can feel uncomfortable. But if you practice finding your Tadasana in a lot of these other poses, you may find that, you know, your alignment feels better, your body feels better, it feels just generally more comfortable when you are in your version of Tadasana, even if it's in a different pose. So that's that. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for signing up to get this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to bringing more content like this to you soon. Thanks.